which is a health tech, AI and health space company. He's the author of a great piece of work called Backable. And he's also a teacher, instructor, faculty at Harvard in the same spaces. So Suneel, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here, everybody.
Absolutely. Next up is Christine Harada, who just joined. Christine, it's great to see you. And somehow you are also named Ashley Williams on Zoom. So it's amazing, this technology. But Christine is president of a company called IX Investments, which is an investment firm that focuses on investing in human needs, social impact, the things that are really going to define how we live, how we work, how we connect with each other for generations to come. She's also done an amazing amount of great work in the policy space, again, around sustainability. So Christine, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure for being here. Absolutely.
And Ashley Williams, who is on my top left of the Hollywood squares, is founder and CEO of a company called RIZZARR, which is a platform that connects brands with content creators, and just doing amazing work in that creative space. She's also an acclaimed podcaster, and she's also a very accomplished debater. And so, as I said to our panelists earlier this morning, be very careful on the panel discussion if you're going to engage in a debate with Ashley. And then last but certainly not least is our dear friend Doug Song, who on Zoom is also now known as Ashley Williams. Ashley, you are very popular. So Doug, I don't know if you want to change your name, but we're just continue celebrating Ashley. But for those that don't know, Doug is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Duo Security, which for many of us, we will have on our devices as part of our dual authentication systems. And Duo Security, which has just had an amazing ride, was recently acquired by Cisco. So Doug is now working with the Cisco team, and just doing amazing work. And what he's also, and I think you'll learn through this conversation, has been deeply connected to the Detroit innovation, Detroit entrepreneurial community as a mentor, working with a number of Detroit startups, Techstars, as an incubator and accelerator, just has done amazing work. And so Doug, welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. So on our panel today, we're really going to have two sort of broad conversations. One is about the innovation and entrepreneurial landscape within the city of Detroit, and what has changed over time, where we see it going. But then also we're going to talk about the new Detroit Center for Innovation. It was announced in October of 2019, last fall, which is really going to be a nice addition and a real value add to the Detroit innovation and entrepreneurial community, bringing talent and companies of both small and large sizes all together to really propel and advance the city forward. So really excited about that. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that. But what I want to do to begin is just given the wealth of experience that we have on the panel, is have a broad conversation about innovation and entrepreneurship in Detroit. And my first question to you, and Doug, we'll start with you, is to get a sense of, you've been here since the early 1990s, working in this space. And I'd love to just get a sense from you, say over the last 10 years, what some of the big shifts and changes have been in the Detroit surrounding community in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Sure. So I think the biggest changes I've seen since I've been here have been the shift from a lot of really big and fairly well-known tech entrepreneurs, folks like everyone knows the two white fellows, P. Carmanos and Dan Gilbert, but not a lot of folks recognize sometimes the others that have also come. Raj Radakuni from a company called Covansys, which he sold for about $1 billion, as well as Bharat Desai of Sintel, right, who also sold this company. Well, actually, I didn't sell this company. IPO this company on the NYSE, and is, I think, a reputed $3 billion net worth. But those kind of exits fomented lots more startup activity that I think came institutionally out of communities like U of M, which has been a pretty interesting economic engine here. And U of M since has kind of crafted all these entrepreneurial programs. I think there were 50 different entrepreneurial programs affiliated with the university doing this stuff. But more broadly, regionally, over the last 10 years, there's been this really, the swell of grassroots support for a broader, more inclusive and community-based entrepreneurship that I think has been really refreshing to see. Even the folks that started this kind of big entrepreneurial, institutional sort of support, like TechTown, right, coming out of Wayne State and so forth, ended up building a whole bunch of small business entrepreneurial programs. Other organizations like Build Detroit or GTRI also end up focusing on support of entrepreneurs that maybe were different, right, in terms of some of the background than just your traditional kind of tech transfer entrepreneurs, for instance, out of Ann Arbor. And so I think what I've been really excited to see is how far that's really gone and become a very rich community of support, even peer-to-peer, with folks like Venture Catalysts, right, holding events like this and others, all the incubators, all the startups, but also all the founders that are now going out of their way to help each other be successful. And so for me, that's been a thing that's been most encouraging to see over the last decade, as entrepreneurship has been something that has gone from being just the domain of a few sort of folks that seem to have either gotten really lucky or the right place, right time, to many, many more folks who are being basically trained in how to identify, access, and then again realize opportunities that we all have in this community.
Excellent, thank you, Doug. And it's really, I think the point you're making is really an important one in terms of the grassroots and bottom-up sort of momentum, and that's really what's going to create that tidal wave of momentum for innovation and entrepreneurship within the city and the region. And you mentioned Bharat Desai. We've got an accelerator at the business school at Michigan. That's the Desai Accelerator, where we're bringing talent from all around the world and trying to help them incubate their businesses and hopefully keeping them in Southeast Michigan and Detroit. And it's been a really nice partnership with Bharat and his family on that. And there's many examples and more examples of that now, which is great to see. So the other panelist, similar question, reactions to what Doug is describing in terms of this shift from a few to many and the evolution that we're seeing in the entrepreneurial and innovation sort of landscape of the city. Suneel, what's your perspective there?
Yeah, I mean, Doug mentioned, a few of the names of people we can look to as inspiring stories. I would put Doug certainly on that list as well, and there are others, and I think, we were talking about this before, Scott. I mean, seeing is believing. When we see stories like this, we begin to believe. I mean, I come from a healthcare background, and one of the sort of mythic characters throughout healthcare is a guy named Roger Bannister. And if you haven't heard that name before, Roger was the first human being to crack a 4-minute mile, to run a 4-minute mile. What's interesting about that is that he was a neurologist as well as a trainer, as well as a runner. And so while a lot of people sort of believed that running a 4-minute mile wasn't possible for a human being, he believed that a lot of it had to do with just believing, the mindset. And so he pushed himself to, bring that time down, and eventually he cracked that. And once he cracked that, the conversation shifted from whether it was possible to how do we get it done. Our athletes all around the world said, okay, now we know that can happen. What do I need to do in order to train, in order to crack that 4-minute mile myself? And I think a lot of that's happening here in Detroit. When we see stories like Doug's story over the past 10 years, starting Duo in 2010, to where he's come now, and we believe it's possible. And so I think that that's one key ingredient, is seeing is believing. And then I think the second thing is, how do we take those stories and actually make them accessible? Doug, for example, has been a great mentor. I mean, I cold called Doug a couple of years ago to go grab breakfast. And he was more than willing to sit down with me and grab coffee and talk. And I think we see more of that happening now. We need even more of that, I think. But the seeing is believing, and then also having exposure to the stories.
Yeah, and it's a really important point in building that sense of community of mentors and coaches, and once you get sort of a density of that community, then things begin to take off. To everyone who's attending and listening in, if you have questions as we go through, just put them in the chat, and Ivana, who's on the call with us, is monitoring those questions. We'll find themes, and we'll take some of those questions as we go about. Christine, you've had a lot of experience on the coast. You're investing in talent, you're investing in companies. What are you seeing as Detroit evolves that makes Detroit and the surrounding community unique? When you look at it from an investor perspective, what makes it unique that gets you excited?
Yeah, there's certainly a couple of things that I think are very extraordinary about the Detroit and Michigan area. So number one, let's definitely not underestimate the love and commitment to the local community. Having observed a lot of people coming in and out of Silicon Valley, there's very much of a gold rush mentality for folks who come out to California and want to make it big and high tech, et cetera, that type of thing. But that sense of, I want to stay here and build my business, build my family, and build out the community isn't nearly as strong. At least it's just my personal anecdotal experience, and for what it's worth, I think, let's not underestimate that. There's a tremendous strength in that kind of regional mindset. To both Doug and Suneel's point around like the willingness of other entrepreneurs to support others in diverse fields, right? And that's, I think, another different thing about Detroit for certain is that the diversity of the entrepreneur base is impressive. Again, to compare it to Northern California, Southern California, it's not tech for retail, for pets, for hair care, for whatever, et cetera. It's pickles, it's healthcare, it's software, it's Shinola and retail, et cetera. And so I think that that's also really a great source of strength for the region. And last but not least, I'd like to also add, I think that Detroit and the Michigan area has been a tremendous leader in a lot of the financial innovations around how do you really do and sustain economic development. This sense of blended capital, whether it be from nonprofits, from institutional capital, et cetera, I think is tremendous.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. And that diversity of entrepreneurs and domains, to your point, really adds to just the economic resilience of the community, which is so important for the city and the region. So thank you for that. Ashley, what's been your experience and what you're witnessing in terms of the evolution of the city and the entrepreneurial innovation landscape?
Yeah, so I grew up in Michigan, and I left to go to California to go to school. And then while I was a journalist, was around the country for a number of years. And I just felt like when I first started my company where I was, not to say anything negative about the ecosystem there, but it was definitely a lot harder to figure out how to navigate getting my foot in the door and figuring out like building connections and feeling a sense of being a part of the community. When I returned home, it was so nice to be able to immediately just kind of feel welcomed in the community, to be able to reach out to people, to get opportunities for just connecting with people, mentorship or resources. So I felt like there was definitely this more sense of helping people who wanted to impact Michigan or make a difference in Michigan. And everybody's really rooting for Michigan, particularly Detroit, to come back and figuring out ways of helping people who want to bring positive change to the city or to Michigan in general to be able to do so. And I also think it's just like diversity of people here is also very different compared to what you might get in other ecosystems or other places, the variety of different businesses. So I think having the welcoming type of community definitely made it easier to start a company. Yeah,
and it's the diversity of talent that you have access to, and the communities the diversity of needs that are there as well. And so one of the questions that has come in from one of the attendees is asking about how innovation, how entrepreneurship will really have a positive impact in the city, in the community, and address the economic and social challenges of the area. And that relates to one of the questions that I was thinking about as I thought about this session, is how do we ensure that the entrepreneurship and the innovation, that momentum that we have and everything that's going on will actually benefit the citizens of Detroit and have sort of an equitable, positive impact across our community. Can you all speak to that, both in terms of how we create an environment that benefits the citizenship of Detroit in an equitable way, but also how we foster innovation and entrepreneurship that really addresses some of the economic and social challenges that we have that are not unique to Detroit, but certainly exist in Detroit?
Yeah, if I might, Scott. So I think two things. One is, we have to change the ratio in terms of, what founders gain access, right, to the opportunities within our community, because that's reflective of the community that's here. And I think one of the things, again, that grassroots sort of support that's developed has done is to create more opportunities for folks to find pathways to success in entrepreneurship that maybe they didn't have before. And so I think there's the Detroit Future City Project that I think last year had a really nice report talking about the fact that there wouldn't be a resurgent Detroit without a resurgent Black middle class. And neighborhood by neighborhood, they were to map out kind of what that looked like. And there are all kinds of folks working on all kinds of angles there, right, to increase Black homeownership, to increase economic opportunity. But I think fundamentally, we need more Black entrepreneurs, I think, in the city of Detroit, to find the kind of success that, again, will rebuild that city, right, from the inside out versus outside in. And I think that, a lot of that grassroots support is really helping to drive, a community practice there. That's what they did in Ann Arbor as well. Like, these entrepreneurs, nobody is successful sort of on their own or by themselves. When we started doing, we were in a start co-op called the Tech Brewery with a whole bunch of other founders who were all just as lost as we were. And we're all sort of finding a way together, figuring out like, hey, what's that state filing about? Or hey, how do we do our taxes? All these things. But you have to have that kind of support, even just moral support, right? Because in the first 3 years of building any business, every day is either the best day or the worst day of your life. And so that kind of community practice is actually super important. I think the second thing I sort of reflect on is, there has to be more opportunities to connect the dots that might already exist. There are sources of funding. There are, structures, right, to, what that support looks like within the city. And I think that the challenge, to be honest, one of the challenges we have in Detroit is that it's a big city, relatively speaking, big geographically, and not as connected as you might think, sometimes between all those different groups. Ann Arbor, we can fit the entire city in our stadium. And so it's a tiny little city. Everybody knows.
Oh, I lost Doug. Did you guys lose Doug? All right, we'll keep going. And Doug, the tech entrepreneur will figure out the tech. That I am confident.
That when I think more and more founders and entrepreneurial leaders in the community, again, take the time to go out of their way to help make those introductions. And so those are the things I think I would see would be most important for us to be successful with, to see a resurgence.
Yeah, so the grassroots with the connections and the mentorship. Ashley, can you speak to that as well from your perspective as you think about building your own business? How do you, from a social innovation, social entrepreneurship perspective, think about, as you build RIZZARR, having a positive impact on the community as well? How do you think about that for yourself as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I definitely think so. About my parents, well, my dad was actually on the school board, one of the county school boards here, and my mom was a teacher. When I first think about it, I think a lot of it has to do with our school systems and really starting to figure out ways of implementing programs or initiatives or activities for students to be able to think about the opportunities that the world has for them in terms of what they can create for their lives. I think, unfortunately, many of them are in situations right now where it's like the possibilities of what is possible is not even shown to them. And I think having it be where we are able to showcase to them different entrepreneurs, as Doug was saying, even entrepreneurs of color who are starting businesses, or just the opportunities in general of how to go about starting a company is really going to kind of change the landscape, which would at least embed that idea into them of what is possible if they're thinking about the changing world of starting a company. But then going off of that, I think even last year during Detroit Startup Week, I had this idea of doing an event focused on women of color, particularly millennials who are thinking about starting a company. And I kind of just had this whim of an idea, not really thinking it was going to be as popular as it was, but it was one of the most well-attended events. And it made me think about how Detroit actually has the fastest growing population of women of color who want to start businesses. So those are things just, in statistically wise, just that are known, but it's like, what are the things that we can put in place in terms of resources, opportunities, mentorship programs that are needed? And I think Detroit has kind of started that foundation of getting that with between TechTown or New Enterprise Forum, or which is in Ann Arbor, or other or Backstage Capital, other things. But I think there definitely needs to be a more plethora of programs and opportunities in order for people to be able to get that mentorship or the resources that they need, because so much of our Build Institute, there's so many of them around in the area. But I think though that there could be even more programs or even more of an outreach of people who either have started companies and have led startups, or either have experience in that in order to help with the growth of those opportunities. Because I feel like at the same time, there's almost like the ceiling where you still, as Doug was saying too, the first 3 years or even just like the first 5 years of starting a company are so challenging beyond words, very painful. And I think many times it's just having someone in your corner or a mentor to be able to make you believe in what is possible, or be able to push you to believe in what is possible, even in those really, really rough days. And I'm so grateful for the mentors who I've been able to access and who have been able to help me to be able just to keep going. So I think not only in terms of the resources in the tangible sense of like either knowing how to build a company like with GBeta or other pre-accelerators or accelerators, but also even how do we cultivate groups of mentors that can actually help those within the community who want to start companies, where we don't just have Detroit Startup Week 1 week a year maybe, but we have a consistent flow of these types of programs where people are able to hear from people who they aspire to be, or who could possibly help them, or whatever, who can feed their soul and give them some nourishment as to what they can do. Prosperous Detroit's another one, as Dr. Harris said. So I think there's so many different programs, but I think there needs to be a continuous stream of that. And I think that will help distinguish Michigan in terms of getting to that next level, because we're already getting there. It's just how do we keep pushing it forward to expedite that. And so from my perspective, that's what I think is probably what's really needed.
Yeah. Actually, I appreciate that. So one of the programs that I've been involved with and am most familiar with is our Detroit Neighborhood Entrepreneurship Project, which was founded through the University of Michigan. My colleague, Dean Michael Barr, who's the dean of our policy school, faculty from the business school, social work, a number of schools across our campus got together and created this Detroit Neighborhood Entrepreneurship Project. And that's one of the things we've seen in this project in working with citizens of Detroit and helping them build their businesses, is that they have the talent, understanding how do I get capital, how do I create connections and get the coaching that I need and the support that I need, how do I make connections not just in the city but across our region, right? Canada, throughout the Midwest, so you can find your customers. And I mean, it's building that ecosystem. And it's going to take a number of these programs that we have in place, not one, but many of them, to really advance us forward in this way. Suneel, being in the health space, I have to imagine that you've thought about this in many different ways in terms of how do you not only build companies and provide jobs and create opportunities, but also to have a positive impact in the community and really have the social impact that you're aiming to have. When you think about Detroit and the surrounding region, how do we build innovation and entrepreneurship in a way that is inclusive and equitable and benefits the community?
I think one of the ways that we do that is by making it not just okay to try, but making it okay to fail. I spent most of the past 15 years in Silicon Valley. I moved back home. Like Ashley, I'm from here, grew up here, and but spent about 10 years in Silicon Valley, and then came back. And I get one of the things that I found to be different, I think, out there that I think we're still working on in Detroit, in the Detroit area, is again making it okay for someone to try and fail. I spent time at a venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins out in the Valley. And one of the things that was interesting about some of the data that they were looking at was when they went back and they look at historical performance across all the entrepreneurs that they invested in. And they compared second-time founders who had succeeded to second-time founders who had failed. It was actually the second-time founders who had failed that performed much better than people who had a win in the past. And I think that mentality has been widely accepted. And when you have a community where that is the case and that is believed, what ends up happening is that you have a lot more people trying. Because I think there's this belief that, look, obviously I want to have real skin in the game. I want this to work. And I'm walking a tightrope as an entrepreneur, but there's still a little bit of a net underneath me. Like if I fall, I'm not going to be screwed. There's still some progress that was made as a result of that. I'll be able to land on my feet, and I might be able to try again. And I think we need to bring that mindset very clearly, I think, into the community, where we make it okay to fail. And I think that when that happens, we start taking on bigger things. I think we start to think in bigger ways, maybe even less incrementally. And Scott, back to your question about social impact. Now more than ever, we incremental thinking is fine, but we need big things. We need big change. And Detroit is a great place, I think, not just to do it for our community, but I think a lot of the things that we can do around education, healthcare, social equity here. And I think there's a belief that if we can do it here, we can take that and have that be a model for the rest of the world. All eyes are on Detroit. I think that there's sort of a belief that, what works here can work in other places. So I think that making it okay to fail is going to be a big part of that path.
Yeah, and I really appreciate it. One of the things that my students often tell me when they're interested in going to entrepreneurship is they feel this need to go to the coast, mostly the West Coast, in part because if they fail, they know they can walk across the street and there'll be another entrepreneur, another startup that they can engage with. So building the density of activity so that entrepreneurs feel comfortable failing, right? Because they can just try and try again, but also the talent that they're trying to attract to work in their startups also feel that this is a world of opportunity, that it's okay to come here, take the risk and fail, because there are many opportunities that you can get engaged in. That density becomes really important there.
Bill Gates said that success is a lousy teacher. Right. And so if you believe that somebody who has tried something and who has failed and is going at it again now has all the things that she or he needs in order to make this successful, whether that be starting their next thing or coming inside another company and taking that entire set of learning that is so much more valuable sometimes than even success. I think that's how we get there.
Yep. No, I appreciate that very much. Now, Suneel, you use the language big change, and Christine, the entire premise of your investment firm is about investing in big change. And so what are the lessons that you have learned in impact investing broadly defined that might inform the future of Detroit and, say, this Midwest region, that ultimately puts it on the map where it's not the East Coast or the West Coast, but it's the Middle Coast?
Yeah, so what we do at IX Investments is we invest in companies that do good for people and planet while making top-tier returns, right? We don't believe in conceding returns. There are industries where it's much more feasible to do that, other industries where it's still not feasible yet. And so a lot of the investments that we end up focusing in are those that help tackle climate change. So green commercial real estate, renewable fuels, carbon to value, things of that nature. And I would say what's really different about us is that, or about impact investing in the field writ large, is that in addition to the financial returns that we're measuring, we're also measuring the impact rate of return, right? So how much impact are we actually having on whether it be the environment, the local economy, number of folks educated, things of that nature. And we're actively measuring that. And we're also, in our case, one of our founders developed a methodology called impact rate of return, where he figured out a way to measure what's the efficiency of your dollar in achieving that impact. So it's a bit of a time value of money element of it. So for a $3 million investment, this particular project or this company says, hey, in 5 years' time, I can help educate 1,000 people. Great, what's that return on that particular investment versus, say, for example, a similar company that we may want to consider investing in that for $2 million and in 5 years, it'll help educate 2,000 people, right? So those are both great businesses to be investing in. And so in addition to the financial, we take a look at the impact element of it as well. And I think, certainly as investors, there's a lot more that we could be and should be doing. I think that, especially given the current environment, there's a lot more that we need to be thinking more about when it comes to economic development. How do we help quantify that? Not just from what I would consider be an easier measurement around like greenhouse gas emissions or, something more technical of that kind of nature. And so that's something that we need to do better on ourselves.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And one of the things I know some of our faculty are exploring is thinking at the community level in similar ways in terms of the return on our invested dollar, in terms of local community impact, and even how to think about that. And whether it's Detroit or any of the other areas that are trying to build their innovation districts or their entrepreneurial ecosystems, I think that's an important factor to play into here as well. I'd love to shift our conversation to the future of Detroit. So we've talked about sort of the evolution of it and some of the needs of Detroit of today. And one of the big things in the last year that's been announced is this Detroit Center for Innovation, which is a partnership between the University of Michigan, Bedrock, which is Dan Gilbert's enterprise in the city, Steve Ross, and who was born and raised in the Detroit area, and is now coming back and trying to do his part in investing in his hometown. And I'd love to just get your thoughts on the Detroit Center for Innovation. And I'd like to start with a broad question, which is, if I put you in charge of the Detroit Center for Innovation, so you are now the CEO and founder of the Detroit Center for Innovation, what do you see as the value proposition? What need is the Detroit Center for Innovation going to meet? And how would you position the Detroit Center for Innovation in the broader landscape of the innovation and entrepreneurial community within the city? Who would like to take that question first? I just gave all of you a job.
Okay, well, I'll go. Since everybody, or who? Anybody want to go before me? Okay, I'll go. I think the thing is, I mean, it's super exciting because really when you have, I feel like when you teach people how to do something that is really a positive impact or positive change, it kind of just creates what I love about, well, the ripple effect, like how RIZZARR is based on, but it creates more ripple effects, and it's just like consistently. So when I'm thinking about it in that standpoint, I'm thinking, well, if this center is able to spark this change or spark inspiration into people and spark more the idea of possibility, I think it's going to become an epicenter for all sorts of entrepreneurial type of endeavors. And I think when you have people who have the access to be able to get the resources that they need through the center. So I would want the center to be able to have every type of resource, or as much as possible, but let's just say money is completely at our disposal. Every type of resource that is needed to create every type of entrepreneurial endeavor or initiative, or to be able to attract a person of a certain caliber to be able to teach a course around that certain topic or area. So I think first is really analyzing what are the needs of the community and the greater ecosystem in terms of people, if they were to be able to have the opportunity to start a company or to make change in their community in some type of initiative, what is it that they think that they need, and having like a starting base of like a program type of system that could really be the catalyst of this, to be able at least to give them the foundation needed to know, how do I go about starting this? So I think with entrepreneurship, at least in my own failing many times over and still many times over, seeing what can I learn and as a basis for me so that I can learn it quickly from other people who have been able to accomplish so many great things that I can learn from, and to be able to have that be that foundation. Then from there, splitting it off into different opportunities, whether it's community, whether it's building the city, whether it's education, whether it's solar energy, whatever the topic might be. But there's so many, I feel like every type of societal type of issue that's going on within within Michigan, and being able then to spin it off where people can go into those set programs and learn about what they can do, the resources and things that they need in order to be able to go do what it is that they need to do. And then kind of like just tracking them and saying, like, what is it that what more can we provide you to be able to be successful, and to be that, see like different markers along their journey. And I think from the different markers, then you have other pillars around what you can change, what needs to be what needs to be put in place. So I think really it's like like an epicenter of innovation, but not just innovation, but inspiration, where people believe that whatever it is that they want to do is possible. And that's, I think what it is, it could really become positioned well, and and it seems it already has the right intention. So I really think it can really do that.
Yeah, and that's really powerful. It's an epicenter of innovation, but also inspiration. And I think those two things in tandem could make a really big impact. Doug, Suneel, I saw you both come off of mute. Anything to add with the job that I just gave you?
Yeah, I think actually I love that, and I love the idea as well of having people who have learned something inside the area also teaching a class. I would certainly take Ashley's class for sure. I think one of the things I think about, Scott, to answer your question, is and Ashley's sort of idea of making the epicenter for innovation, is that we're in a pretty unique time right now as well, when it comes to talent and where people are thinking about where they want to spend their careers. I remember when I moved from San Francisco to Detroit, there were a lot of people who gave me funny looks, but I don't think that's the case anymore. I think people on the coast are thinking about different places to live. There was a survey that was taken just a few days ago, and they surveyed 4,400 Bay Area tech workers. And they asked them, if work from home became a permanent thing, would you want to stay in the Bay Area? And I think 2/3 of them said that they would very, very seriously consider moving from the Bay Area. And I think that provides this Detroit Center of Innovation like a real opportunity. I mean, not just for what's happening here in Detroit, but to kind of be think of it as a light tower for all of these people who are now trying to think about where do I want to spend the rest of my career, to say, hey, Detroit is an amazing place to be. even if you don't have roots here. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you like to build more than just a startup, but you actually want to build an ecosystem, and you want to be at the front lines of change, you want to be in a swing state where a lot of important things are happening culturally, socially, mentally, like it is an amazing place to be able to create change. And so to be out there and to say, and to be, actively, I think, recruiting and creating sort of this home for talent to be, I think is a really important thing. And I think we can all agree that attracting and retaining talent is a big part of our vision, and we want to make that happen. COVID-19 has in some ways, I think, created an opportunity here for us to now be that home. So I think there's a huge role for everybody who's involved with DCI to really do that. One final thing I'll add is that Congressman Tim Ryan, who represents the 13th district in Ohio, which is like a Youngstown area, at one point in time they had created an initiative where they were actively going out to places like New York and Silicon Valley and actually setting up a little bit of an office out there so that they could recruit talent and just talk about everything that was happening in the ecosystem. Tell stories like the stories of Duo Security and the companies that were built, and also the things that were happening on the social side. I think we have to be out there a little bit, and I think DCI can play a role in that.
I appreciate this.
Yeah.
Doug, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, I think if I may, there's a challenge I'd like to put forward, for the university to really think about, which is how it really engages community in its journey to drive this impact. Because I think, to be frank, this is something that, U of M, it does not do as much of, frankly, as we've seen other universities do elsewhere. I always think of University of Michigan being kind of like the Berkeley of the Midwest, or maybe vice versa. Berkeley is like the University of Michigan of the West Coast. But one of the big differences, besides the fact that we have a hospital and a healthcare system and they don't, is that Berkeley does have a telephone book-sized, I guess people don't know what those are anymore, but anyway, really thick book, of extension classes, a catalog of all these classes that if you're in the community, you can take and be part of. And I think, back in the 90s, my wife did her PhD, her master's in social work, and one of her advisors, Dr. Larry Gant, started this program in the city of Detroit, right, the School of Social Work, looking at the digital divide. And, I used to go there with my wife, with a bunch of our geek friends and her social work friends, and we go and install, networks and computers in schools in Southwest and Detroit summer, Grace Lee Boggs thing in the city. And we realized, just how stark, right, that divide really was. I think one of the things that U of M could do in the city, as it kind of thinks about its place in the innovation ecosystem, is to help close that entrepreneurial divide. That, it's complicated. It involves lots of different issues that are not just, when I talk to these entrepreneurial foundation funders of these entrepreneurial organizations that are foundations about where they can best invest, right, to help that kind of work, sometimes I say it's not just about the specific entrepreneurial support, but making sure that kids have, a hot meal a day, making sure that, there's, like when we were going into the schools, there wasn't even toilet paper in some of the public schools, right? There are really fundamental, basic human needs sort of issues that we had to sort of address, and we still have to address, and I'm not quite done yet with, in the city of Detroit. And you think about, again, what that ecosystem looks like, there are many problems to solve from many different angles. And thankfully, U of M has this highly interdisciplinary, research-driven sort of approach. What we need to marry that to is the community-driven approach, right, that, again, has existed in the city for many, many years. And I think, that could be just a really amazing opportunity, right, for U of M to come back to the city after how many hundreds of years outside of it, and again connect with all the groups that have been there carrying the water for all this time, to try to tie this together, right, in a way that could have a broader impact, help accelerate that progress toward, again, a truly just city, right, one in which opportunity is accessible by everybody. And so my challenge at U of M would be to try to figure out how it engages the community that already exists in that way, try to help map what that entrepreneurial divide really looks like, and again, figure out where to best apply some of its considerable resources to make sure that, everybody has that opportunity. Because like, Suneel and Ashley and others have said, I think half the challenge sometimes is people don't know it's even possible until they've seen it. And, I'm an old skateboarder, and we spend, 80%, skateboarders spend 80% of their time falling on their face, right? And so you sort of win or learn. But why we watch skateboard videos and all this kind of stuff isn't so we learn how to do tricks. We learn they can be done, right? We watch somebody very often who looks like us or who doesn't, but skateboarding is a very diverse community. But the fact that they are doing something that seemed impossible is an inspiration, right, for us to be able to go and try something. So those are the things I think that U of M could actually help bring together, given its profile in this community and the opportunity that exists in Detroit.
Yeah, Doug, I really appreciate that. And as I think about the DCI, the Detroit Center for Innovation, it cannot simply be about bringing new talent to the city. Yes, it will do that, but with the citizens of Detroit, and Justin Woods, who's one of my students, if it's the same Justin Woods that I know, is in the Q&A, and one of his points is Detroit is roughly 80% Black. It has big socioeconomic differences within the city, and in my mind, DCI not only has to engage the community and benefit the citizens of Detroit, but what I'd like to see is the citizens of Detroit helping us co-create what is there and what the DCI can do, because if they're co-creating it with us, not only will it better meet the needs, but in the co-creation process, the citizens of Detroit will actually be able to see what's possible, because now we're working together and building it. And the DCI, to me, provides a platform and opportunity for that in a way that the University of Michigan and most universities, for that matter, have not historically been very good at and done. And so that's why I get one of the reasons I get really excited about it. So Ivana, I see that you've come on, and I know our timing is a little bit off given the technical difficulties on the front end. Is there something that I need to be aware of in terms of timing? Are we? Okay, we're good until 11:30. Okay. So Christine, I think you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I think, what's just to relate it to my personal experience. I'm a child of immigrants, relatively unsophisticated parents when it came to finance and, how do we find capital and things of that nature. They put their heads down, their bums up, and they worked hard, and they were good enough to be able to provide me and my sister an opportunity. And I think that someplace like DCI is, I think the hook on DCI, the responsibility is to provide two things, right? So one is, as an immigrant kid, all I wanted was a chance. I can do it, man. Just give me a chance. Just give me that chance. I will show you I can do it. I will figure it out. So I think it's key to be able to help foster that kind of unteachable enthusiasm, right? If somebody's got the passion and they're willing to put the work in it, that's great, fantastic. Let's foster that with the technical skill set of whatever it be, like around like, how do I actually do fundraising? How do I tell my story in multiple different ways in a way that actually resonates with this particular audience? How do I do some of the financial engineering? If I have investors from Canada, what kind of technical blockers, blah, 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 do I really need to be thinking about? And so helping them with thinking about providing both the technical support as well as the opportunity to foster that additional passion and enthusiasm.
Yeah, and how we cultivate that in the community in a way where everyone feels they're part of it, right? Is so important, and if we do it right, can be really powerful for the future of the city. Now, you all are entrepreneurs, investors, and we've talked a little bit about if you were sort of the founder and CEO of DCI, how would you position it? But now let's look at it from the other perspective. As an investor, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, what would you want to see in DCI to really get you excited about collaborating with DCI? Whether it's engaging in terms of talent or technology development, whatever it is, what as a founder, as a CEO, as an investor would get you excited about wanting to get involved with DCI?
Well, I guess I can start just to say that, and Deborah mentioned it in the comments, but like the diversity having, I think, because the thing is with many times with different programs or things that are that might come within the ecosystem, many times it's like there's a limit on the capacity of individuals, or it's almost like you have to be at a certain caliber first before you're admitted in at a certain point. And I think that is, it's totally understandable, because it makes you then, as Christina was saying, like get even more gun-ho about having that, making sure that you're ready, like just to have that chance. But I think the thing is, as an entrepreneur, and my perspective, it's how can we make it so that anyone who, whatever level that you're on, in terms of equity, like you still have an opportunity to have access to what it is that you need to at least start to get going. Because many times, say for example, in many cases, even with RIZZARR, like if I had applied to a program earlier, but I was still too early, I had to wait until a whole other year or another turnaround in order to be able to, and I see there's minutes, in order to be able to have access to it. So I think if there's any way that you can start from where you are, and there's an opportunity within the center so that wherever you are, you can still have opportunity to get going. I think that would be super helpful than having it be where you have to wait or like still take more time to figure it out. Because the more time you take to figure it out, the more time you're, I mean, in a sense, kind of like wasting, but you're figuring out on your own, but it could be so much more sped up if you're able to have that opportunity ahead of time. So I feel like, I hope that the individuals will figure out a way so that they're able to have opportunities for people wherever, at whatever stage that you're at with your company.
Yeah, and Ashley, to that end, I know one of the aspirations of DCI, and obviously there's a lot of work to be done to make a dream a reality, because it's a startup in and of itself, right? But I know one of the aspirations was to be a home in whatever form that's supposed to take, to both small, large enterprises, everything in between. And so hopefully that, meeting people where they're at and their needs.
Yeah. So Scott, I mean, similarly, there's a forum that exists in Arbor called the Arbor New Tech Meetup, a2newtech.org, and I pasted a link on the chat. But if you check it out, it's 7,000 members we have that over the last 10 years have watched 5 new startup founders present every month. And so if you think about that, there's a tremendous number of companies and even more founders that have all been part of this community, rooting for each other, right, and helping each other, find these paths of success. That kind of hub of a community is something that I would hope that DCI might be able to help support. Because here in Arbor, we've been supported that way by U of M. So that event started at the engineering school. It moved to the business school, and we used to hold at Blau Auditorium, the 500-seat auditorium, and now it's over at the law school. And Dana Thompson, actually one of the professors who runs the entrepreneurial law clinic there, helps host us there. But U of M could actually do something similar, where again we have all these different folks show up, because that fabric of all those relationships is really what comprises the community, and the fact that again people can find those connections to opportunity, dollars, talent, and so forth quickly through each other. Because that's not a good event if you show up and you meet a bunch of people. It's a great event if you show up and you've introduced a bunch of people. And that's the standard that we really set to really ensure that, again, that we are building a community person by person, relationship by relationship, that will basically persist beyond all of us. So anyways, that's what I would hope that, maybe if DCI could actually think about how can it have representation from all these different perspectives, hosted in a forum where, again, the focus really is to see how many founders we're able to support and give these turns at bat to, that would be, I think, the most exciting thing for me to be part of and come down.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, and part of that support that Doug is talking about, I think, is sort of classic entrepreneurship support on thinking about new ideas and building companies. And I think part of it also is making it okay to talk about all the things that are going wrong. with your startup. You know, all the struggle that we know. I mean, there's an incredibly high rate of depression when we talk about people who are founders, who are building companies, because like Doug and Ashley have said, I mean, these are your darkest days, and they can be your brightest days as well. But I think having, Scott, I think a place where people can talk about that stuff openly is really important, because one of the things I've noticed is that you can kind of, when you bring entrepreneurs together, they can be sort of one of two different types of forums. And one type of forum is like how I'm killing it, right? And everybody's talking about like how their company is going to be the next great thing. But then there's another type of forum, and this tends to be done in sort of smaller circles, but it's kind of like everything's off the rails right now. Like, I don't know what to do. And those are the conversations that for me as an entrepreneur were the best, most helpful conversations when you can have that honesty. You know, I took a trip to Bhutan about a year and a half ago. And Bhutan measures the country's progress based on what they call gross national happiness. So they don't measure just based on gross domestic product, but they use economic input as something that rolls up into a higher sort of, you know, value system, which they call gross national happiness. And, you know, while I was there, I had a chance to spend time with the team that goes out and collects all the research. And they've been doing this now for 50 years, 50. And, you know, I asked them, well, is there anything in particular that you have found that while you're surveying people, if you could ask like one question, just to kind of get a real indicator of how happy a person is, what would that question be? And the question that they said is, yeah, there is actually a very specific question we can ask. And the question is, if you were in trouble right now, would you have people who could come to your side? And if you believe the answer to that question is yes, your likelihood of being happier is much, much higher. And I think as entrepreneurs, we definitely need that. Like we definitely need that. We need people we can have honest conversations with, who don't have equity in our companies, that we're not trying to impress, that we don't feel like we need to get approval from, but we just need advice and we need honesty. And so I think if DCI can be a place where entrepreneurs can go to have honest, open conversations, I think that'd be a huge value to the community.
Yeah, Suneel, I appreciate that. It reminds me of one of the innovations that some students got together and created a few years ago was Failure Lab, is what they called it. And it's basically TED Talks about how I failed instead of TED Talks about this great thing that I did. And it was all with the intent and aspiration of normalizing really a conversation about what's not going well, and a community of people who can support. So I know we're short on time, and so with just the few minutes we have remaining, I think at least indirectly we've tried to address a lot of the questions that came up in the chat and the few in the Q&A. My apologies if we didn't get to all of them. I'd love to pick the brains of the panelists. If the Detroit Center for Innovation is wildly successful, if we as a broader community are able to do the things we're talking about in terms of talent, capital, mentorship, et cetera, what is different in your mind about Detroit 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when we look back? What do you think is going to be different if all the stuff that we've been talking about is wildly successful? What's going to be different about the city relative to where it is today?
I have an outsider's observation, if that's okay. In my experience in working across a number of different organizations, both Fortune 500 companies, small companies, government, et cetera, you know, we all tend to fall into our little silos or circles of friends, right? And I think that one of the great outcomes of DCI could be that it ends up becoming a real center for mavens, or that whole connector idea, such that those different silos aren't as rigid anymore, that there's a lot more connectivity, not just perhaps like if you look at a hierarchical large organization, perhaps the leaders of those areas of marketing, of finance, of sales, et cetera, they all know each other, but the working level folks may not know each other, and the entry level folks certainly may not know each other, type of thing. And I think that, you know, with somebody like a DCI, you would see a lot more integration across the various levels, across different disciplines, and across different skill sets. And I think that that's what's really needed in order to be able to help create real solutions at last, especially for entrepreneurs as you're trying to make your businesses stick.
Thank you, Christine. Ashley, what about what's your perspective? What's different about the city?
Well, I'm going to say it really quickly because I don't have the time, but just thinking about like how the automotive industry started here, and that was like a catalyst to like that whole entrepreneurial endeavor and part of our history. But I also think then going into that, this could be a whole nother endeavor as well, or opportunity for how we collectively change a community that was once how it is, you know, and I guess and currently to expediting the change and positive change around Detroit and the greater Michigan and greater Michigan area and the state in general. So I hope that as we speed things up forward, that will help in creating all of these other societal changes that are needed. And because of this, so almost like a revolution in a sense for people. And I also hope too, in the sense of having a large amount of people of color, minority, et cetera, being able to be the catalyst within changing different landscapes within our own community within the state. So that's how I see it will change.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Suneel, Doug, years from now, what's different about the city if we're wildly successful in what we're talking about?
Sure. So from my perspective, you know, if we're successful with all this, not only will Detroit be one of the best places to create and grow a company, it might already be that, you know, it may not be all that recognized by everybody, but you know, for instance, even after Duo's acquisition by Cisco, we had other founders, other of our folks went on to become founders, and one of them, my old CIO, Raphael, he started his company actually in the city of Detroit, downtown, right, versus Ann Arbor. But I think, you know, we'll also hopefully see the impact it has on the city. You know, Detroit is a wonderful city with a tremendous amount of history, and I think we have to continue that, you know, sort of growth and change that's happened. You know, we did sort of hit rock bottom, you know, some time ago, came through bankruptcy, first city in U.S. history to do so successfully, and now we have nowhere to go but up. We just need to make sure, again, it's a rising tide that floats all boats versus, you know, creates even more sort of divide and division, right, between the city and suburbs and so forth. And so, so my hope is that, you know, if we're successful with all of this, we will fulfill that dream of Detroit Future City, where Detroit's resurgence has become as a result of the resurgence of a Black middle class. That again, a lot of these activities and efforts that we see today at grassroots level of supporting entrepreneurs, but specifically creating more Black-owned businesses that really are high growth, you know, potentially high tech. You know, this is what I am really excited about, and I think we're well on our way to doing that. But you know, U of M could be a major catalyst in helping see that happen even faster with the amount of investment and with institutional support it can provide. So,
yeah, thanks, Doug. And Suneel, with the little time we have left.
Yeah. I mean, I think you talk to kids today who want to be entrepreneurs. I mean, this is such a high percentage of children, students right now that want to go do something on their own, which is amazing to see. And I want that narrative to be, hey, I want to go do that. I want to go create this, you know, big company. I want to create this big change, but I want to do it here. I want to base it right out of Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the kids in other parts of the world wanting to seeing Detroit as a place to land and create,
yeah. But
also the citizens of Detroit feeling like they're supported by their home community to create themselves, and that's what I get really inspired by, is just the equitable opportunity to actually do something amazing together. So thank you to all of our panelists, to everybody who joined. Thank you so much. I appreciate the flexibility and the adaptability with the technology earlier this morning, and to the organizers of Detroit Startup Week. Keep it going. This is great to build a community. So thank you to all. Stay safe and well. Bye-bye.